Good morning to my first live stream of a somatic practice class. I inevitably am going to have some technical glitches here. I cannot look at comments while I'm broadcasting. I will respond to anything that you ask in the comments after the class is over. And depending on how we do with response, we will continue these on a regular basis. But let's get started. First of all, my name is Matthew Vandergiesen, and I've been involved in somatic-oriented work for over 40 years. I started out as a massage therapist and then gradually graduated towards more a wider range of different kinds of practices using breath and other forms of touch as well as movement. And these practices that I'm going to teach you today have been a foundational part of my own learning in my personal life, but also supporting my work as a practitioner. So this is going to come from a very authentic place for me. A lot of the work that I'm going to show you today and in the future comes from a foundation of work by Thomas Hanna, who is credited with coining the modern use of the term somatics, but also was a student of Moshe Feldenkrais and took Feldenkrais's work and distilled it down into some of the essential practices that he called his cat stretch series. So those movements I'm going to be using as a foundation for what I'm going to be teaching you, but also what I'm going to draw upon is a very wide range of influences from some of the very earliest voices in the somatics movement, such as the German practitioner movements that came with sort of people like Elsa Gindler, and throughout Europe with some of the other practitioners that I'll name as I go along, and then into North America with some of the breath practitioners, movement practitioners, some people, for example, like Charlotte Salver, who brought a lot of Gindler's practices into North America, and the generations of people after that. So that what I hope you'll get out of this in the end is not just building some foundational movement practices that are grounded in very deep traditions, but also to be able to give you things that you can take into everyday life, that you can do while you're waiting at a stoplight in your car, that you can do while you're lying in bed when you wake up in the middle of the night and are having trouble falling asleep, that you can insert them into your life in ways that help you get just a little bit more back into your body when life is kind of pushing you out into who knows where, and also therefore allow you to be not just more in your body and present to yourself, but more present to your engagements with the world around you. So having said that, let's just get started. And the ease of this kind of work is that it starts with you lying on your back, and it also starts with the most minimalist of movements, which is not very common in this world that we have. Everything is sort of bigger and accomplishing, getting to an end of physicality. In other words, that you move better, that you stretch better, that your posture is better. But what this work starts with is saying, let's start with actually engaging with where you get stuck and looking at where that relationship breaks down. So the kind of language that you're going to hear me use a lot here is that when you notice a tension in your body, it's actually a point of meeting between your being's natural reorganizing impulse to move into a more congruent relationship with the stimulus that surround it at any moment, and some kind of interrupting action that may come from a habit. This is the way I stand, or from a trauma. I can't allow myself that kind of freedom of movement. Something bad might happen, pain or reaction from those outside of me. And it's at that place where those two impulses meet that we experience tension, the tension of one thing pushing against another. And so this becomes a very fruitful place to investigate and to start to unpack how our habits are interrupting both our movement and our posture. So with that beginning piece, let's get started. So I'm going to lie on my back. If you haven't had anything to prepare yourself for, you can lie flat on the floor. You can grab a blanket. I suggest that you have a pillow to support your head so that it's there if you need it. And if you have a yoga mat, better yet. But you can do this, as I said before, pretty much anywhere, in any level of dress or undress, so you choose what works best for you. So here we go, over onto my back. And the first thing that we do in a somatic practice that uses basic somatics principles is we start by orienting ourselves in the world, locating not just where you are physically externally, but also internally. So it looks something like this. As you lie on your back, bring your sensory awareness to where you actually notice that there is a surface that you're lying on. So let's start with the most easy place to locate, which is noticing how your back, your upper back, comes into contact. And some of the language that has been developed that's helpful for bringing us into this engagement is to ask questions. So, for example, how do you even know that that mat, that floor is there? And just start looking for the sensations that tell you that that surface is there. To get even more granular, to help draw your awareness that has been filtering out these awarenesses of the locating of yourself, to help draw it into engagement, you can get even more particular with your questions. What do I know about my left shoulder blade? What is the shape that it brings into the surface I'm lying on? How much do I let gravity move it down into that surface? So what is its weight as well as its shape? And you'll notice that in a questioning approach, it's approach of inquiry, not directiveness. We're not saying, make your shoulder relax more. So it's quite different than a lot of the approaches you may have been using before, and you may notice that it challenges your habits of how you engage with your body, and that's part of the innovativeness of this whole somatics approach, is that it starts breaking up not just our habits of how we hold in our body, but how we engage with our body. So as you move your attention across to the right shoulder blade, once again, see what you notice that's different about its shape. How does it come down into the mat? How does it know the mat is there? Is that a different sensory awareness compared to the left side? How much does it allow the mass or the density of your body to come into the surface of the floor, the mat? Or another way of asking that question, once again, is how much do you let gravity carry you down into the surface? And you may notice that there's a little bit of a different way of holding ourselves between the right and the left side. Don't try to change that at the moment. Just be curious about that and really focus on the sensations that tell you about that difference. The more you become aware of the sensations of what's actually there in the moment, the more that impulse to reorganize will start to move into ascendancy and will start to work itself on those habits of holding. And you will notice after a while that something in you just wants to shift. And waiting for that wanting to shift is where the relearning starts to happen, where we just don't put another directive on top of that stuckness of saying, just relax your shoulder, but we let your body find its own path to that place, something which values and honors its own integrity and allows it in the end to recover its capacity to respond rather than covering it in another layer of do this, make it look like this. So as you notice what's happening in your back between those two shoulder blades, it's just bring your awareness out into your arms and just notice if there's a difference between how your upper arm finds the surface of the mat, of the floor. Do you notice if there's a difference between how the left arm and the right arm allow gravity to come down through the arm and into the surface you're lying on? Try the same thing as you come down into your forearms. And just notice how much you are allowing yourself to let your forearms meet with the surface that they are in contact with. How much do you allow your hands to have that same sense of where are the surfaces of points of contact? How much do my hands know that there is a surface there? And as you start to do this, you might notice that this awareness of surfaces also starts to bring an increased awareness of the shape of your body, the shape of your fingers, of your palms, of your wrists. So there's more sensory awareness that starts coming into your consciousness about not just the surface you're in contact with, but that part of you that is in contact with the surface. And just let yourself have that experience. So as you come up through your forearms and your upper arms and back to your shoulders, and just notice the status of what is there sensorily in the moment. How are you holding yourself now? Sometimes as you bring your focus into your arms, you might have more of an awareness, awakening of the tension that is shifting in your arms, awakens a tension in your shoulders. So not every shift in awareness is going to bring an automatic letting down. Sometimes it will unearth a holding. Or you may notice that your shoulders let down even more, your back's got even more contact. But whichever way your awareness shifts, stay with the sensations, stay with your curiosity. And this will allow the natural reorganizations that your body wants to do to have their best chance to do what they want. Come down through your back and notice how you know where your pelvis is on the surface. There's going to be a bit of an arch in your lower back, and we're going to come back to that in a moment, although you might just note how much of an arch you have in your back. And of course, I have started demonstrating this with my legs out straight. If your lower back or pelvis is full of enough discomfort that it's not comfortable for you to lie this way, put a little bit of pillow under your knees, or of course you can also lie, and I'll just demonstrate this for a second, with your knees bent and your feet flat on the mat. And we're going to come to this position anyway in a little bit, but this is an alternative to making sure that you don't have too much disruption of sensation that it gets in the way of you exploring the sensation of what's there. So in whatever position you have your legs, bent or straight, then bring your awareness into your pelvis. And once again, notice the weighting that's there. That question of thinking about gravity, allows you to sort of get a more of a sense of, are there ways in which you are stopping yourself from coming into the contact and allowing it to be there for you. So it's not just a weight that's happening, but it's being mediated by our own sense of how we hold ourselves. There might be a difference as you bring your awareness across to the left side of how much that weight comes down. And just notice the weighting, the surface contact, and then bring your awareness across to the right side of your pelvis. And once again, just notice what's there. How much do you let those sensations come into connection? And the more you bring these wonderings, this process of inquiry, the more your mind is engaged and won't have as much of a tendency to drift off. It actually can become the first steps of a meditation practice for those of you who have trouble meditating, by bringing your focus into the granular sensations of how your body is in this moment. And so that as you bring your awareness down your legs, so once again, what is the sense of where my thighs come in contact with the mat? And depending on how much there's an arch in your back, how tight your hip flexors are, there might be a lightness, like a barely contacting feel with the back of your thighs. Or you may notice that there's like a weight there. And anything in between is possible. The same thing coming down into the backs of your knees, noticing the differences there, into your calves. Where are the contacts in your calves? Perhaps your one leg is rotated a little bit more outward than the other, and so you might notice the contact surface of your calf is different on one side than the other. And then coming down through your ankles to your heels, where you also have that contact of your heels with the floor, and just noticing how you know that floor is there. And then just as I was mentioning when we were working through the arms, see what it's like to use those surface contacts to notice an awakened awareness of the foot that is coming into contact through that heel. This is the quality of the right foot and the left foot. How much footness sensation is there and available to you? What is the quality of your sense of your calves? How much do you know about your shins as well as your calf contact into the mat? The sense of your knees and how the whole of your knees is a part of that sense of the back of your knee and how it's in relationship with the floor. And then coming up through your thighs and just noticing the contact through your thighs. Perhaps that sense of weighting into your pelvis in the floor also gives you a sense of the pelvis that is there. How much do you know of your pelvis? Can you feel a little bit of the bones that come around to hold on either side? Do you feel a little bit of the center of your pelvis? What's there in the bowl of your pelvis? And then as you come up into your abdomen and your lower back, just noticing what is the sense of the space, the landscape, the inner landscape of your abdomen. And is there any sense of relationship between how you hold, how you are aware of yourself in your lower back spine? What do they know about each other? And then as you come up into your rib cage, and just visiting again that sense of contact of your back into the floor, that you might also notice that inhabiting your rib cage is this thing that we call breath. And how much has your breath been interested in this investigative work that you've been doing? What's it like now if you bring your awareness to it? We only know our breathing by the sensations that tell us how it's affecting our body. So as you notice your breathing, you are noticing the sensations of your breathing. Where do you notice those sensations? What's the quality of them? What does it tell you about the landscape, the inner landscape of your rib cage? How the ribs move externally, but also what's the inner shape of your rib cage? And of course, some of these parts of our body may feel very vague and amorphous, but even that has sensation to it. And just really let yourself soak in a bit of what's actually there. And then finally, come back up your spine to noticing how your head is in contact with the floor. I've left this for the end because there's a lot of holding that can happen in our necks. And so to help the rest of your body find itself first can give some point of reference for our neck so it won't just feel isolated when we get focused on it. It's got a landscape, a community that is already a little bit more alive, a little bit more responsive. So when you come to noticing how much weight you allow of your head to come into the surface, it could be that you're holding your head up a little bit. It could be that there's so much tension in your neck that you're pressing it into the surface. But just notice the quality of how you know that surface is there, what it tells you about your neck and how it's holding not just through the back of your neck, but through the front, those areas where breath and swallowing happen. And then just coming from that surface of contact, following through the bone of the cranium, and just noticing what sensations tell you about the shape of your cranium, about perhaps the spaces where your ears are, where your eyes are. How much do they allow your eyes to rest into those spaces, into those orbits? How much do you know about your sinuses, your nasal passages, your mouth, your lips? And just let that awakening awareness that those sensations might be there to just inform your sense of how you are in this moment, which could include some openness in one part of your head, what we would think of as our brain for a moment. Is there one part that feels more congested? Is there another part that feels more open? So there's a whole sensory inner landscape to explore through the inside of your head, as well as the outer structure of it. That is part of how you hold your sense of yourself in your body. And just let each part of what you notice be there so that as you widen out your awareness, to just take in a general sense of all the different sensations, all the different stars or lights in the constellation of your being that might have turned on just a little bit as you've done this scan, and notice where this brings you to now. So that is the first step in a somatics approach to your body, just noticing where you are in this moment. And you could be sitting in a chair, having tea and talking to someone, and you could say to yourself, notice yourself. And as you say, notice yourself, you might bring some awareness of how you are sitting in that chair in the moment, how you're holding your shoulders. And always starting with the sensations of contact gives you a point of reference for everything else that's happening in your body. Because if you have pains in your body, if you don't have that point of reference for the surfaces, you don't know how to hold that experience, that there's nothing there to help you hold that experience. So knowing your surfaces is the first important step to moving into your body, because otherwise the sensations that are there internally can just feel too much to stay with. It helps do what we call grounding ourselves, but it grounds ourselves into what's actually there physically in this moment. So the next piece of just being aware, of noticing yourself, is it also allows a little bit more sensation to be there, so that you might go, oh, I have a breath that's been waiting to happen, or my legs want to shift, and have my feet want to have more contact with the floor if you happen to be standing or sitting, so that it allows, once again, the possibility of little shifts into more congruency in this moment as you bring your awareness to just how you are in this very moment. It helps give you this moment, then allows you to move more fluidly into the next moment. So now that we've done that first scan and looked a little bit about how it might be an application in everyday life, let's start introducing a little bit of disruption through movement. So I'm going to get you to bring your awareness down into your left leg. And we're going to explore something which is very particular to Somatic's work, as well as the non-directive part. This part is very important as well, so I want to start into it slowly. So here's what I'm going to get you to do, is coming back to your awareness of how you know the surface under your left leg is there. See if you can find out what you would organize within your muscles, within your nervous system, to increase that sense of contact. In other words, by pressing a little bit down into the surface. And some of you may find on any particular day that you can find those surfaces and you can just start to increase the pressure, and you're going to feel an increased intensity of sensation that tells you that's happening. But others of you, or you on any other particular day, may find that you've got the sensations, but you have no idea how to organize your pressure into that surface. They are disconnected. So all you do then is just try to find that contact, and inevitably there's going to be a little bit of effort where you're going to try to move into that contact. And just in tensing, just in trying, there will be sensations there. It's kind of like one of those tense release exercises that's just in the middle of no sense of contact with surfaces necessarily. You just tighten up and release. Well, we're doing a little bit, but our orientation is not to just tense in the middle of nowhere, but tense with the attempt to increase pressure downward into that sensory awareness of the surface. And then holding at the peak of that, where you're just feeling into the sensations of it, and you don't, if you did it anymore, you'd really be pushing, you'd be bulldozing. So just find that peak where you're just increasing the pressure enough that you really feel the sensations. Hold it for a moment so it soaks in, and then see what it's like to slowly let the energy, that charge build up in your nervous system, to drain back out of your awareness of the leg. How much can you let drain out? What's the end point of how your leg feels? And already you may notice that just doing that, you notice the difference between your left leg and your right leg. Now, one of the wonderful things about having this bilateral thing in our bodies is that we actually can focus on the other side for a moment, and we're just going to let that left leg soak in what just happened. So come over to the right leg, and first of all, it's always very important,
Find the surfaces. How do you know that that mat, that floor is there under your thigh, your leg, your buttock, your heel? And then once you've got that point of orientation, only then start to see what it would be like to increase the sensations of contact. And with this leg, you may have a little more success, or it may be even worse as far as trying to get that sense of connection. But whatever happens for you, see what it's like to orient towards those sensations of contact with the intention of pressing downward. And as you do that, as you come to the peak of movement, you might notice that things have happened elsewhere in your body, that not just in the leg, but an awakening of response might have happened in the left leg, in your back, in your arms and shoulders, in your head. So notice anything that awakens with that, and then slowly let it ease off, and just notice what happens as you do that. How the rest of your body changes with it. And as you finally come to some end point where you've kind of come to neutral again, is that the same neutral as where you started? Are you noticing any difference in the right leg compared to the left leg, for example, in the sense of how your legs come down into contact with the floor? How much, in other words, do you let gravity come down into your legs and carry your legs into the floor? And then just doing a brief noticing through the rest of your body, just how much is there a change in how you're holding through your shoulders and arms, through your head? And how's your breath doing with all of this? Is there a way that it's changed? Or do you notice when you bring your awareness to your breath that there's a way that you notice the sensations of stopping it a little bit more? And just as you do that, letting your body, just as mine just did, shift its breathing pattern a little bit. Let's come back to that left leg again now. So in revisiting it again, you now have the sensations of its first exploration and any residual or collateral effect that's happened between what happened with the right leg when it pressed down and its effect on the left. So we've got some awakenings that have happened from different things that we've done. So now come back to this leg, find the contact with the surfaces a little bit more again, and then see what it's like this time to orient yourself toward trying to get into more contact. And just notice if there's any difference in what's accessible to you, in how your leg starts to move, how much it can orient itself towards finding the contact with the floor. And then also if there's any shifting in what happens in the rest of your body. And just allowing yourself to explore those movements. Allow those responses to happen, feeling the sensations of them. And then slowly easing off, and noticing how everything, not just your left leg, but everything else in your body shifts and responds. The 3 stages of a movement, the bringing intention into a movement, and that starts to orient it as it starts to try to do what your intention is, brings a charge of action, and it's usually full of conflict, full of what you are intending and the things that disrupt that from happening. So you'll feel that tension that arises as you push into the conflict. Most of the time we push back past it, hardly notice that it's there, and then wonder why we're stiff or can't move as freely as we used to. We're going to stay right at that edge. The second part of it is at the edge, you're feeling into the sensations of the conflict. So it's a really ripe area to notice what's there. And things will happen. You might already notice that the end place is different, that you don't have that same shortness of restriction. Like you may have only got a certain distance the first time. The second time, you may notice that you can go further with ease. So that end place changes as you hang out with the sensations, not just of the movement, but with the sensations of that point of conflict. And then the third thing is the sensations of letting down is where reorganization already starts to happen. There's so much learning that happens in letting down. For example, in weightlifting, it's the negatives, where as you slowly lengthen under load, you start to notice where the weaknesses are in the coordination of your muscle, neuromuscular organization of that movement. There might be trembling that wasn't there when you were pressing and coming into the movement. So going slowly and feeling the letting down really lets you catch the nuances of how you've been holding yourself, of the pathways movement might be able to have. And then finally, as you come back down to the resting position, you get to notice where that brought you to in this moment. How much do you actually let yourself let down? Might become more of an awareness for you as you complete the movement, for example. Now bring your awareness across to the right side, and we'll take all of those things that I just mentioned and apply them to, first of all, noticing the focus of how your leg is in its contact with the surface, and then being curious about what's going to happen this time as I start to try to find those surfaces and press into them to increase my awareness of what's there. And just allowing however your body comes into that orientation, being curious about if there's a different ease or range, if there's a different response in the rest of your body, and just allowing yourself to explore and take in the sensations of every single response that happens in the leg, in the surfaces, through the rest of your body, even into your breath, hanging out at the top of that movement, and then just letting it back down again. We are exploring something that in Thomas Hanna's Cat Stretch series was the very beginning of his movement series. And we are approaching a particular version of this, of what he called the four corners. And we'll get into more specifics about that as we go along. But this is a really good way of approaching it because it really lets you get the foundations of the movement approach. So the next part of this four corners practice is to stay with where we are for a moment and to try the opposite direction. So the opposite direction is basically applying the same ideas, but into imagining that you're going to lift that left leg. But the orientation isn't internally just to lift it, but rather to notice it in relationship to the surface you're lying on. So as you notice that surface and then just think, what would it take to lighten my pressure into that surface? And think of the movement that way. So for example, if we were to do like the common thing would be, which we would do in yoga or any of our other movement practice, is to start to go through range, like to bring your leg up. You're going to push right through the weight of your leg and the conflicts of movement. There's lots to be learned with going through it. Like we get with those movements, we get all kinds of positive results from our yoga and our Pilates movement, but we can miss this nuanced first place where already embedded in that movement are our limitations, our conflicts. So if you just come into that leg, feel how much it wants to lift, feel how it comes as it comes into gravity, that there is a natural pushback. You can feel, if you go very subtly, that actually there's a point where you would start to strain if you went any further. You can feel yourself pushing into the gravity, into the weight of your own leg. Hang out there for a moment. Notice all the pieces of that. Just very subtly, then slowly let it back off. So just as we were exploring just a gentle pressing down, now we've explored a gentle pressing up, we're leaving the surface of the contact with the floor. And what you start noticing is how much you come into gravity, how much gravity is a piece of this. So as you let down, you're letting down with the awareness, not just of the floor under you, but of the gravity a little bit more. Now let's try that on the right side. So bring your awareness not just to the leg, but to the contact surface. And then as you start to bring your intention of your leg releasing the pressure of that contact surface, so lightening the pressure, coming up a little bit, and notice how your muscles start to organize, pushing up into gravity. You're kind of like a rocket ship trying to leave the launching pad. And you know at the very beginning how it's working so hard and it hardly even looks like it's moving. And just notice that effort expended and coming up into gravity, and then just slowly let your rocket gently come back down into the launching pad. Some of you are going to feel your leg actually able to lift off the floor, and some of you may find that you can hardly even get the organization of tension in your leg. So the most important part, once again, is not getting some result that is about movement, something that F.M. Alexander in the Alexander technique would call end gating, where we're trying to get to someplace rather than being aware of the mean, what he called the means whereby, or what's actually happening. What's the process of how we're getting there? What are we sacrificing to get there? So we've got an intention, we want to go a direction, but we're more interested in the process. Now we're going to bring it across to that left leg again. And just notice what's happening, first of all, in both legs, in your back. And then just noticing the contact with the floor, bring that awareness of lifting off that contact into your left leg. And notice, is there more organization available in your leg now? Does your leg start to move with a little bit of ease in its lightening of pressure off the floor? So that the end range, the place where you move into resistance, might have a little bit more ease from starting to end range. And then just let it ease slowly back off with all that learning of letting down. Let that just hang out for a moment to take it in. And then bring your awareness back across to the right side. And just once again, feeling the contact surface with the floor, then slowly increase your awareness of your intention of lightening that pressure and noticing not just what happens in engagement in your leg, but what happens through the rest of your body. How's your body responding to this? Through the left leg, through your back, through your arms, through your head, and just hanging out at the top of that movement. And then slowly letting yourself ease back down from that pressure. Just checking my watch to make sure that we're staying on time here fabulously. Now that we've moved both up and down with our legs, that's something that you can explore in the future. As I've mentioned, when are you lying on your back? Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night, or it's waking up in the morning, or you're having trouble falling asleep at night, like as you lie down because you've got all the tensions of the day. These are the times that you can apply these micro movements of awareness. And you'll often notice that it just helps you settle a little bit more into this place. So we're going to bring that now into your upper body. So coming into your left arm, and once again, always bring your awareness of surfaces first. It's a really important discipline. So easily we jump across that surface contact movement orientation. So bring yourself into that left arm. Notice how you know that arm is even in contact with the floor. Then gradually increase your pressure downwards into that contact. The same questions apply. Can you even find the contact and your tension sort of connecting with each other? How much can you feel the increase in sensations if you can get some movement? And notice where the end range is, where you start to feel like, oh, if I pushed any more, I would be just trying too hard. And just feel into the sensations of that. And then gradually ease off again. Then while that's integrating on the left side, bring your awareness across your shoulders. Notice what's happening between the left arm and shoulder, the right arm and shoulder. This is something that Feldenkrais and other people who used his work would often use to great effect, as the comparisons of sensations is another way of helping you bring more sensory response into your body, not just awareness, but response. The parts of your body start communicating better because they become more of this aware of the sensations of two different places. They start coordinating their sense of themselves as a community. So as you bring your awareness into the surfaces by which you know that your arm is coming into the floor, then slowly bring your attention of finding those sensations, pressing into them a little bit more, increasing until you come to whatever the peak of pressing is on this side that really lets you feel the sensations of pushing, the sensations of the floor, and as you may have already been noticing, affects how your body organizes through the other arm and shoulder, through your hips, through your legs, and just let yourself feel some of those broader effects as well, so that the community of movement starts to feel itself. And then slowly let the easing off happen, the slow letting down. It's almost like letting air slowly out of a tire, just kind of letting it until you find out what its end point is. Is this a different sense of where you are now than where you were when you first started? What's the sense across your arms and your back, across your legs and pelvis, your lower back? So if we bring this awareness back to your left arm, we're going to find the contact surface, and then we're going to revisit that sense of pushing down and noticing what is available for you now in pressing into the contact surface. How much movement or ease of movement is there before you start running into the turbulence of conflict, of tension? And just noticing what happens there and through the rest of your body. Is it a different response through your body than if you noticed just recently from the right side? And then once you've held at that peak for a moment, letting it soak in, just gradually noticing the letting down process until you come to whatever is the current neutral point, where you can notice through your body the difference between upper and lower, between left and right. And then finding that contact surface, how much you know that your right arm knows that there is a floor there, a mat there, then slowly increasing your pressure down into that contact. And just once again, what is the ease of range? Is it different now? You might see some indications that there's some reorganizing happening. Your body's becoming more coordinated in its movement. But you also might notice it increases awareness of attention in a particular place that you didn't notice, that as the ease of movement happens in one part, you're pressing into something that was kind of hidden before because everything else was so tight anyway. But now in contrast, you notice its specificity of holding, how it interrupts your movement in your arm, your neck, your back, your legs. And some of it may just go, oh, I don't need to do that. And it would just naturally feel like I could let go. I can feel how I'm holding myself from participating. And some of it may just feel like it's intractable. And just let yourself notice the sensations of it. Notice from your past awareness that gradually that might shift as you awaken to its actual how it is, the sensations of it, in relationship to surfaces, in relationship to the rest of your body. It's like you're doing family therapy. As you listen to one area, then the system can start to, in feeling listened to, start to interact more fluidly with the parts that are listening. So now we're going to do the same thing that we did with the legs. We're going to try coming up. And coming up with the arms is easier to kind of fool ourselves because we don't have the same weight to deal with. I'm kind of pushing past that nuance of where disorganization happens. So first of all, notice the contact surface of your back, your shoulder, your arm, and then bring your intention to easing out of that pressure downwards. So you're coming up into gravity, of course, as you lighten the pressure of your arm on the floor, but be very particular about just feeling into that same thing you were doing with the leg. Like, where do I start noticing the nuances of the pressure? If I push even any more, I would lose that sense of ease. So only what wants to move with ease, feeling the edge of where that starts to break down, hanging out there for a moment, and then slowly, slowly, slowly letting yourself come back down, giving your arm back more and more to gravity, carrying it not just into itself more, but into the contact surface more. What's it like to try the same thing now on the right side, finding how you know your arm is actually there in contact with the floor, and then bringing your intention. How much can I find what it would take to lighten the pressure, to come up into gravity, and gradually let yourself just have whatever orients itself. It can be shocking at times, considering how much we're able to move through life, to actually notice where the limitations are if we get down into the nuances of movement. So just unpack all that disorganization that you normally just skate right over top of. Feel into the top of your movement. Where does the breakdown of movement start to happen? Where pushing into gravity would feel like you were just starting to bulldoze your movement. Hang out there, feel the sensations, and then gradually, gradually let yourself come back down. So this is a version of the four corners, where you do a little bit of pressing and a little bit of lifting with each of the limbs, and they gradually awaken their connection into the core. And you may notice that already there is awakening of movements from one part of your body to another, which we will explore in the next section of this, when we explore sort of where Hannah's movement goes from what we have done into connecting through the whole body. And we're going to finish with one example of that, which is Hannah's basic movement after this four corners exploration, which is the arch and curl. And I'm just going to check and see how much time I have. And we can just introduce this before we come to the end of the class. So in this case, you bend your knees, put your feet flat on the floor if you haven't been doing that already. Notice already how that changes your awareness of what's happening in your lower back and all the way through your spine. So there's a spinal connection that starts happening with this. It's the first movement that really starts to identify connecting into the core. The movement I'm going to leave you with is a very simple one, which is explore what it's like to find contact through your feet, and then to just gently increase your pressure down into your feet. And you'll notice that that affects your pelvis. You might notice tension in how you hold your pelvis. Some of you might notice how it kind of lifts your pelvis a bit as it rolls, and increases pressure down into your lower back. But the most important part is just to notice what's available to you. So you just increase that pressure, come to the end of what naturally moves, and then let it fall off again and come back to neutral. When we do this with something which is the core of the body, we don't have that bilateral working between the two legs at this point. There are versions I'll show you where you can do that in a future class. But what we're going to do is just pretend to come back to working with the core, which is now that you notice your feet a little bit more on the mat, on the surface that you're lying on, see what it's like to lighten that pressure just as you've done with your limbs in other ways. And you'll notice that as you do that, you're sort of figuring out, how would I bring my feet up a little bit, bring my legs up into gravity? It'll lighten the pressure of your feet on the floor. It'll tend to rotate your pelvis a little bit. Some of you may not notice that so much, so stay with what you actually notice. What are the sensations of the response that happens? It may arch your lower back a little bit so that we're starting to get that connection from the limbs up into the core. And then just hang out at whatever level it is. For many of you, your feet might not even come off the floor. Just follow where ease brings you into resistance. And at that point, hang out there once again, just as we've done, and slowly then let it come off. And you may notice that actually it worked up in through your spine all the way to your head. Your head may want to shift a little bit as you come back down to neutral. Your shoulders and arms may shift a little bit. This is the beginning of Hannah's arch and curl. Try this 2 or 3 times through the day, lying in bed, lying on the floor, just playing with this. I will show you the rest of the movement in the next class, and you will also find on the YouTube channel where I show these movements. So you can always go and see the full thing, but this is where we're really going to break it down in real time so you can understand why these movements are important. Because if you just do them as another exercise, you miss all the value of the whole somatics contribution to movement. Okay, so that's where we'll stop for today. I just want to come up and thank you all for following this. And we'll see in the comments where there's any questions you have, any suggestions for how often this might be useful to you, so that I can start shaping this as we go forward and see where this might be a useful part of your daily practice. So until then, take care.